Warning, the following podcast may contain graphic content, language, sexual nature that some may find offensive. Listening discretion is advised. Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show on how they made their mark. Today, a former member of the Chicago outfit and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Operation Family Secrets. He was a government informant who helped take down several major mob figures in a landmark case referred to as Operation Family Secrets by the FBI. Family Secrets was the nation's most expansive mob murder racketeering indictment, a 3-month trial, 130 witnesses that saw his testimony bring down his own father. Please welcome to the show, Frank Calabrese Jr. Frank, welcome to Before the Lights.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks for having me.
Let's just dive in. What it was like living in the compound and what the compound was or is.
Okay. So, a lot of times I say I was kind of born into the life of organized crime or this way of life. The compound, we grew up, so I'm half Irish, half Italian. My Irish side, my grandfather, Ed Sticks Hanley, used to fight against Al Capone and the Irish gang, the O'Donnell gang. On my Italian side, my dad and my uncle were both high-ranking made members of the Chicago mob. So this compound was all family in there. Growing up there, it was great. See, in Chicago, you weren't supposed to bring your kids into this life. In New York, it was their legacy to bring them in. So as kids, we really didn't know what our fathers did in the neighborhood, even though a lot of the guys in life were in the life in the neighborhood. So I felt loved. I felt safe. Tons of great family stories. And when we were young, my dad never brought the street into the home because he always felt it corroded the family structure.
At age 14, you committed your first burglary. What kind of repercussions were there for doing that?
Well, it was kind of a crazy story because I was in 8th grade and I watched a movie of these guys robbing, and I was like, ooh, I can do that. I did it more so real. Don't ask me why. And I broke into a neighbor's house in the neighborhood. They weren't home, and I had a pillow sack dressed in black. I stole some jewelry and some money, change and stuff, and I came home and hid it real good in the house. About 2 a.m, my dad and uncle wake me up, and they're like, is this yours? I was like, oh, my God, how did they find this so fast? Well, my dad says, I says, yeah, and he was mad, but he got more mad when I told him why I did it because of the movie. He said, son, you don't do this in this neighborhood. Number one, our neighbors are like friends. And number two, you get your hands cut off in this neighborhood. You don't ever do that again. And then I had found out later on how they found it right away. I hid it in the same spot my dad and my uncle were hiding all their mob bookwork. So I guess me and my dad thought alike even at a young age. So, and then at that point, it was like, I guess I had it in my blood a little bit.
Did you have to return the items?
No, my dad didn't want to take a chance of doing that. They just tossed it all out. Actually, it was actually costume jewelry and a handful of dollars and quarters and dimes and nickels and pennies. Again, I was in grammar school. It was a stupid thing I did. It really was.
High school, Holy Cross, Elmwood Park, Illinois. Who are some of the kids that you went to school with? Okay,
I went to school with Joey Ayupa's nephews. He didn't have kids. The nephews were like kids. You had Dominic Cortina's kids, Jackie Cerrone's family, Johnny DeFranzo, Joey Andriacchi. I mean, I could just keep going down the list. It was flooded the area. But again, all those kids, they did not get in the life because you weren't supposed to do that in Chicago. Okay. And we didn't hang on the corner, Tommy, like in some cities where guys hung on the corner and wanted to be gangsters. I mean, I'm sure there were guys in Chicago that did that too. But we wanted, everybody wanted to go to college, play sports. I mean, I lettered in football. I lettered in basketball in high school. Right out of high school, I fought in the Golden Gloves. I was undefeated. I won the heavyweight in 1979 and 80. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to college.
After high school, then you get a job working for the city. So yes. You're not getting into the life. Where did this start, or how did it manifest that you had to hand over your paychecks to your father?
Well, so I always worked. I had the biggest paper route in town when I was in grammar school, but all my friends worked too. At 14 years old, I started as a busboy at Armand's, okay, a big place in the neighborhood. So I always worked. In high school, during the sports, during working, my dad started wanting to teach me about the street. So once you learn street smarts, you go to school, you learn book smarts, you learn both of them are going to be very, very successful in life. So he gave me these little tasks, these little errands to do. And I looked at him like, do it, be a good son and do it for your dad. So I started going with my uncle to assist, going to the bookstores, the adult bookstores to collect money. I'd sit down and do book work with them. I'd pass a few messages here and there. And again, I just wanted to get it done. But my dad, it was like the more he's seen of him and me, the more he kept bringing me along and giving me more to do and telling me more about the street. Now, as far as the paychecks go, my dad was very, I guess he was very stern with his kids. You know, he wanted to protect them to the point where it was ironic because he doesn't want us to get in trouble and do anything wrong. But if you did it with him, it's okay. Double standard. But so he would control us. See, we learned years later, my brother, my uncle, my mother, my family, that my dad had this sadness, this phobia. He always was kind of like the family patriarch. And he felt that if we were successful, that we wouldn't love him no more. So what would he do? He'd control us. And the big way to control is fear and money. So we would have to, give him our paychecks, and he'd want to know what we wanted money for, and he would give it to us.
If you would, Frank, explain to our listeners who your father was, Frank Calabrese Sr. Did he have multiple personalities, and was he somebody that you feared?
He was actually, my dad was the only man on this earth that I ever feared, and I feared him terribly. Now, I respect what a lot of other men are capable of. My dad, I feared. My dad had three personalities. Good dad. Christmas was his favorite day. There's people in the neighborhood who only knew the good side. Very generous, very loving. A lot of great memories of him. And then there was the gangster dad. My dad was very, very smart. He was a master manipulator, but he was very street smart. And he learned from some of the best on the street. And I use that today in a positive way. And then you had the killer dad. My dad's signature trait of killing you was with a rope and a knife. First, he would strangle you. Then when he knew you were dead, he'd cut your throat from ear to ear. He loved hands-on. If he was going to use a gun, his two favorite choices were one, a shotgun, a pump shotgun because automatics can jam, and revolvers. He loved up close. Five shot snub-nose revolver that you could carry in your pocket. He loved too. Easy to get rid of. My dad so in this life, a lot of times you're either a money maker, mm-hmm. or you're a thief, or you're a street guy. Street guys do a lot of heavy work. Heavy work is killing, hurting, blowing things up, burning things down. My dad had both, and he was used for both. My dad brought in money, never took money from the mob, always turned in money. His boss was Angelo LaPietra, who was one of the guys that went to jail on the case for the skim in Kansas City. Angelo was a very treacherous man, and that's where my dad learned a lot of that. And my dad, my uncle, another guy, Ronnie Jarrett, there was 4 or 5 guys in Angelo's crew that the bosses used a lot in the 70s and early 80s when they wanted somebody dead and they wanted it done right away. My dad was good at what he did, and I seen it firsthand. I was around it.
Frank, your brother and your father were both made, correct?
My uncle and my father.
Your uncle
yes.
And your father. Were you ever proposed to be made?
No. First of all, my dad's not supposed to bring me in. Second of all, I'm half Irish. And I was my dad's secret weapon. That's what he looked at. I was there for the family. Very few people. I led 2 lives. A lot of people in the neighborhood, they thought I ran a few errands for my dad. We were so underground. We never drove fancy cars. We were never out there flashing money. My dad said, no, don't be a spot cone. Okay, so a lot of people didn't know. Even the government did not know. They thought we gave out money. There was a time when my dad was one of the biggest loan sharks in the 80s. We never had less than $1 million on the street. Now, at 10% a week, that adds up to some money. Mm-hmm. And my dad was good at what he did with that. Some people, we we did booking for a while, but it was too much of a struggle with the agents. So he just charged everybody a tax. You pay $1,000 a week and you do whatever you want.
In 1973, Mad Sam DeStefano murder, I believe that was carried out by Tony Spilotro, but was your father involved in that as well?
Not that I know of. I don't know. He's never spoke about it. I don't believe he was. I was 13 at the time. So, I was pretty young. I just remember, everybody talking about it because I lived about 6 or 8 blocks from where it happened. So where Mad Sam lived was in Galewood, and the only thing that separates Galewood from Elmwood Park is Harlem Avenue. Galewood was also where Michael Spilotro had his restaurant, Hoagie's Pub.
Do you know maybe who took out Sam Giancana?
I talk about that on my tours, yeah, and I've talked about it before. It was one of the cases. So in the trial, Operation Family Secrets, it was a historical trial for a couple of reasons, and I need to say this before I get to talking about Sam. But it was the first time the government in Chicago used the RICO Act the way it was supposed to be used, go after the organization, not just individuals. Remember, Rudy Giuliani did it a handful of years earlier, and he was successful taking down the heads of the 5 families. The other thing was it was the first time. See, I had to go against my dad. I just opened the doors for all this. They tried to kill my Uncle Nick in jail. With my dad's blessing, he started cooperating. My uncle was so historical because it was the first time a made member in Chicago ever testified. And the knowledge my uncle had and the stuff he was involved with just blew him away. So if you go all the way back to the days of Al Capone, there's around a little over 1,200 gangland slayings that were documented with 14 convictions. In this case alone, there was 18 convicted and up to close to 35 murders that the government closed the books on, or they felt that they were solved. They never made a lot of them public. Sam Giancana was one of it. Okay. And this was what I was told. This is what I have 302s on it from my uncle testifying. I've talked with certain FBI agents, certain prosecutors, and they felt strongly that it was Tony Accardo. And here's the reasons why. Sam Giancana was a very smart man, and he was very treacherous, and he knew he was going in front of Senate Hearing Committee. It's a closed-door committee. Mm-hmm. And he knows that these guys aren't going to be comfortable. Tony Accardo is the boss. Very smart, always thought out of the box, never did a day in jail. Tony calls for Sam in this life, like they called for the Spilotro brothers. It's called Whistle In. Sam ain't coming. He knows what's going on. Then Tony's going to spend the rest of his life in jail because Tony and Sam were so close at one time. Tony also knew bosses don't kill, right? That's what everybody says. Bosses don't kill. What are you, nuts? Tony was 66 years old at the time. Tony knew Sam's house better than anybody. Okay, Tony knew if he went to the house with Sam's permission. I don't know how to get in. I've never heard any of that. I just know that it was told that it was Tony, and Tony was the one that killed him. Okay, the gun, I've been told a lot of stories about the gun that was found. It was said by Angelo LaPietra, old man, never too old to do heavy work, insinuated on a Giancana murder when it came up. The gun wasn't supposed to be found. Tony dropped it in a bad spot when he was going through the woods. It makes sense, okay? Because now Tony wants everybody to think, nobody's going to think he did it, right? He's the boss. Bosses don't kill. Mm-hmm. I wasn't there, so I don't know. I'm just telling you how I found out and why I feel that makes a lot of sense.
Frank, when I say the year 1984 and follow that up with Frankie and Johnny's VIP champagne room, what does that mean to you?
So I was 24 years old, and a friend of mine, we were both working at nightclubs, and I always had extra jobs. So day I worked for the city. At night when I worked for my dad. On the weekends, I worked at a nightclub called 123 on Diversity Avenue. Me and a guy named Johnny Galeotto. Johnny Galeotto was Jimmy Marcello's nephew. So we opened up this club, and we were the first ones to have a VIP room. We did everything. We had all these dreams, and everything was going good for a little bit. The owner hung around down on Grand Avenue on the patch, and he was close with Joey Lombardo's kid. And when he seen my father, Jimmy, all these guys coming in, I think he thought that we were going to try to muscle them, and we weren't. We were busting our rear. We were being good. And when this guy, one day he locked the doors on us, and we were just like, oh my God, can we get back in to get our stuff? And we just cleared the place out and left. But it was so much fun. It was our first nightclub. And, we did a lot of things that later on a lot of other places started doing. Tom, we charged a cover charge back then. Nobody charged a cover charge. You know what we charged it for? Just so people would feel important coming in that we can waive the charge. That's all. I think we should charge $5 a head. And it was just, we wanted to give you that experience that you loved.
From 1971 to 86, it was a violent bombing time in Chicago, in Las Vegas, in Kansas City. There was car bombs. It seemed like it was just a very violent time. From your recollection, was this just the standard way to try and take somebody out, was to bomb them out, or instead of shooting them?
Well, my understanding from what was told to me, there was a guy, and I'm pretty sure he's still around, so I don't want to say his name, but he came from Italy, and he knew about explosives. He was real good, and that's what they were using in Italy was explosive. You remember, they were blowing a lot of people up, a lot of cars, and so they started to use explosives on people that they felt they couldn't get close to. And they were learning how to use plastic explosives. Dynamite was a big thing too. Naturally, dynamite was much easier than the plastic explosives. But yeah, so that's what it was. That was in Chicago. So during that period.
Folks, go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to the book, Operation Family Secrets. You have to get your hands on this. I picked it up, thought, well, I'll read 20, 30 pages today, and, I'll pick it up again another time. Before I knew it, I was 70, 80 pages in and completely hooked. This is a great read. It's going to grab you. Make sure you go to the show notes and get your hands on Operation Family Secrets. Frank, the Tony Spilotro hit has had this massive nationwide attention to it because of everything surrounding it in the movie Casino. From what you know, the hit, he was whistled in, as you said, him and his brother. It wasn't like the movie where they were actually beating to death at the cornfield. They were actually killed in a basement, from my understanding. Jimmy Marcello was the one that was actually really involved on this.
As far as the Spilotros, there was a 7-man hit team that was sent to Vegas. That's something I talk about on the tours. I have testimony from Michael Spilotro's wife, his daughter, the brother Pat. I have 302s on everything that transpired in Vegas, and I'm going to come out with all that eventually. But, I knew that. In fact, I had sat down with Dr. Pat Spilotro, who recently passed away. I sat down with him out in Vegas after the trial. He wanted to meet me, talk with me. He used to be my dentist. Spilotro family was our friends. Michael Spilotro, his family, they were all our friends. This was very hard. This was very concerning for my dad and my uncle, because when the order came down to kill Tony and Michael in Chicago, my dad was concerned about it. My uncle was concerned about it, because Michael, even though he was running around with his brother, he really, really didn't do anything that deserved for his life to go. But it was the only way they can get Tony. And that bothered my dad and my uncle, because they felt, what would make this? Never been done before. You don't do stuff like that. You weren't supposed to. Okay. So that bothered them. That really bothered them. It bothered me. And it was another trial. It was another case that was solved and made public, and there were convictions on it. Okay. It was always one of the things that I got. Everybody talked, and it's in all the transcripts and everything, that Tony got killed because he was doing a lot of things in Vegas that he wasn't supposed to do. He was putting out money and killing people and burying them. It came out that he was dealing with drugs, but he wasn't doing it personally. He was financing some people that were doing it, because drugs were a big no-no. But all of us don't always follow the rules with that. And he was becoming very high profile in Vegas, and the bosses were getting concerned. And then when because Vegas back then, what a lot of people don't understand is every city Chicago, Buffalo, New York. Each one has a crime family, a whole city spoken for. Mm-hmm. But in Vegas at that time when Tony was out there, the different casinos were spoken for, but the city was an open city. And Tony was a great leader. He was an ambitious guy. He was very dangerous. And so when they found out he was having an affair with Lefty Rosenthal's wife, that was a lot of the reasons they used to have him killed. They used the reason that Michael got killed because he got smart with a couple of guys that were either lieutenants or capos. And guys were just, it's called criminal justification. But the real reason that I always felt that they wanted to get rid of him was because I think they felt that Tony had a lot of backing. He was a great leader. And when these bosses knew that they were going to jail for a long time, that he was going to take everything over, and they wanted to stop that. And that's just, that there is my thought on it.
Was Joey Aiuppa the one who ordered it?
That's what I was told. He ordered it. He wanted it done before they went to jail. He wanted it done fast. Now, when you're getting back to that money, when this hit team was out in Vegas, John Ficarata was the one running the hit team. John was being sent money to get this done, and they weren't getting it done, and the bosses were getting antsy, and they were getting concerned that what's going on and what's John doing with all the money. Now, Jimmy Marcello met my dad, gave him $100,000, and my dad sent that money out there. Back then, you could send stuff in the mail. It was easy to do. Mm-hmm. So he sent John $100,000. Later on, when my uncle comes back, my dad wants to know that was more than once that they sent money. How much did you get out of that? He said a couple of thousand. So the bosses were mad at John Ficarata because they want to know what he did with all this money. And that's a whole story in itself, too.
What were your days like in Vegas at the time, like hitting places like Stardust?
I was a kid when we used to go to the Stardust, 7th grade, 8th grade. I don't even know if it was a freshman high school, but we used to go. And my dad would take us sometimes to go with our mother. And I remember there was the one pool where there were all the suites, and that's where everybody would be. And as a kid, I'd see stuff, and it was, I didn't know no difference. I'd ask my dad, how come your name is Frank Morrow when they page people? And, all these guys are out there used to all love to play gin rummy, and they all had fictitious names. He's like, oh, it's just a game we play, and so I remember going with a girl named Sandy Nitty, the Nitty Travel Company, and she was 2 years younger than me, and she's got a security guard at one of the slot machines, and she's playing the slot machines at 12 years old, So, there was a lot of stuff I seen out there that was my biggest thing. The greatest thing I used to do was me and some of the other kids, our fathers would all go to that restaurant in the Stardust called Aku Aku. It was a Polynesian place. We'd go in there and we'd wait till they were all sitting at the table, and I go in there real loud, hey, Dad, can I get a couple dollars to go next door to Circus? He'd give me $10. This is the early 70s. I'm a kid. I get a lot of, come here, kid. We'd make our way around the table. Sometimes I'd leave $150, $200. Now to get in Circus, we would just walk behind a couple. Like we were, almost hold on to get in past the guards, and we just go play arcade games. So there were a lot of good times. I didn't. When I was young and I'd ask my father what he did for school or something, he says, I'm an operating engineer. He showed me his union card. I didn't question it. It's just, I really didn't care. We all knew they were different, but we didn't know.
Explain to my listeners the terms, my feet are bothering me and they're hurting real bad. What do those mean?
So one of the things my dad taught me right away was, he says, Frankie, he says, the FBI is our biggest enemy. He said, they're very sophisticated, unlimited manpower, unlimited resources. They can make all the mistakes they want. We can't make one. So it was very important. Everything was coded. Okay, we used to call the FBI Scarpa Grande because he used to wear the wingtip shoes, Sicilian slang. If we were being followed, we would call each other and say, my feet are hurting me. And then you'd get, well, why don't you just go home then if your feet are hurting you? There's no reason to try to go to work or anything. So that was our code that we would use on the phone. Everything we talked about, different gender. Tommy, I call you Tammy, or, I say that girl, or, and sometimes my father would have a conversation. He's on recording, he's having a conversation. I had 3 different nicknames, Junior, Smiley, Murphy, and he'd be having a mish. And he'd be having a conversation, and you think he's talking about these 5 people? He's talking about me. It was so confusing that the prosecutor, when we were going over the tapes one time, he's like, so wait, we were talking about recipes. That video is online. and we're in prison and we're in code and we're talking about recipes. Well, really, it was money to be collected. We're talking about chefs. It's the guys that are collecting the money. And the prosecutor had all the code terms and everything, but my dad was so good that he's like, so that one they're talking about money? No, they're talking about recipes for real. Okay, this one recipes? No, that's money. He goes, damn. He goes, I got the codes and everything. He goes, you guys were good. So, because you see some guys will say, hey, do you have those 3 pieces of lumber? The 3 pieces of lumber? And then all of a sudden there's somebody testifying that they had $3 million. It's kind of obvious. So yes. It had to weave into a story.
This is my story. No symptoms to being diagnosed with colon cancer, which led to 4 surgeries and a 50-50 survival rate. It then spread to my liver, in which only 3% are caught in time. Now, a 1% chance it ever comes back. And I'm on the road to inspiring everyone, because you have 3 choices: live, die, or fight. Bernie Siegel said, no matter what the statistics say, there's always a way. To book me, Tommy Canale, to speak to your event or group, go to TommyCanale.com. That's TommyCanale.com, and get ready to be inspired to inspire others, because you're one day away from changing your life. Talk about a time that you overslept, that you're supposed to meet your father, because you had talked about you had this fear for him. And what happened with that?
So it was after the Spilotros got killed. It was after the government was getting stronger. The mob's getting paranoid, killing each other off. My dad's at his work. He's becoming more controlling, more manipulative, more violent, and more paranoid with family members. And so I'm working for the city in the day. I got businesses on the side, and I'm working with my dad and my uncle. We moved all our bookwork out of our house to a different location. One night I'm late. I get late. My dad beats the living shit out of me when I get to the basement. Now, in my book, it talks about in the 80s, even though it was a death sentence, I made a dumb move and started my own little cocaine ring, powder cocaine, and then I wound up developing a cocaine habit, which I've been clean since 1997. Most embarrassing thing. That's the first most embarrassing thing that robbed in that house. That's second. And so it's a death penalty, right? So when I got to this basement, my dad was beaten. My uncle was there. I thought they found out about the drugs, and I'm a dead man. So I was scared. While I'm covering up, my dad's beating me. My uncle starts yelling at my dad. I thought he was going to join in. He turns around and yells at my dad. He goes, what are you doing? Why are you beating Frankie up for being late? He goes, you know what? You're not the brother I know. This life's changing. I'm going to have no part of this, and runs out the house, leaves my dad alone with me. Now my dad, a minute later, turns into that good dad. He says, son, here, take this towel, go wash your face and hands. I don't want to be there no more. So at this point, I don't even want to do this anymore. I don't know who my dad is. None of us do. I mean, it was a rough time. That was in my late 20s, and it was rough. It was a rough time.
Was this about the same time, Frank, when you took, was it 600 or 800,000 from his hiding place and he found out, or is that a different time?
No, that's shortly after that. So that happened that night. And about a week later, he comes up to me and he says, don't do it. I go, what? Don't do what? Because I know what you're thinking. Don't run on me. The world ain't big enough. I'll find you. I was thinking about taking my family, actually moving out to Vegas or Arizona. And, my kids were born right after that. When my son was born premature, I'm like, what are my legacy going to be for my kids? I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to be around my dad. These guys are killing each other off. So I went and I hid. I started hiding from my father. And when I got an apartment that a friend owned, so my name wasn't on the apartment or anything, and I hid from my dad. And, he had found me after a while. And I was trying to get away from him, trying to get my affairs in order. Well, I go back earlier telling you the dad controlling our money. Mm-hmm. My dad was holding I don't know, close to $300,000 from stuff I did with him. Not only my checks, but properties that we bought and sold, equipment, other jobs, legal and illegal. And I can go ask for my dad for the money. And he always just tell us, don't worry about the money. It's all going to be yours one day. So I don't know if it was the drugs clouding my head or what, but I knew where my dad had money stashed. I went to one of the hiding places. I was going to take my $300,000. I said, you know what, let me take it all. And I invested in some restaurants. I put money on the street, the drugs, everything. I'm going to put it back in a while. And I didn't. I just said, you know what? I'm not going to put it back. He hasn't come around for a year. He knows he's wrong. It was my money. I kept it, moved back in the neighborhood, became a little bit of an idiot like Spot Cohn, but I got all these legitimate businesses going. But I'm still parting with the coke, which was the bad thing. And one day he showed up at my house. Mm. And that was one of the worst things that happened in my life. Now, in the trial, you hear me just get up and say that I blew it all. And it was a lot of money because my dad wanted to defer from the tapes and everything and defer from the case and concentrate on this to try to get me caught up in lies. So, and the judge told his lawyer, enough. I don't care if he took $1 million, $2 million. He took the money. He blew it all. Leave it there. Let's move on.
The time that he put a gun to your face in a garage, did you think that was the end of it? He was going to pull the trigger on you?
Yeah. So my dad, because he's seen that I didn't want to be around there no more, and I was going through a lot, it had to do after that money, the fact that, I'm paying him the money back. I got these restaurants. He says he owns everything. He owns me. And it started one night because I had my mother working at the restaurant. He didn't want her there, but she liked to be there. And I thought unconditional love. I'm getting this straightened out with my dad. Hopefully one day he's just going to, son, you're doing a good job. Let's be family again. I get a call one night. Come and meet me by the park. Let's go for coffee. We're hugging it out. You're doing a good job. I'm just like, this is good, Dad. This is great. We get in the car. We're going for coffee. We get in the same car. He's driving. He stops at a work garage. A work garage is where we keep illegal stuff, cars, guns, all that stuff. He goes, I got to run in for a minute. He goes, why don't you take a walk with me? I said, okay. I'm telling him a story. We're laughing. He's rubbing my neck. When I walked in there, I opened the door first. He comes in behind me and I hear the door slam and I turn around. He got me by the neck and he's got a gun in my face. And I could see the glassy eyes. And I just knew whenever my dad was crazy, I've been around crazy people, their eyes get glassy. And I thought, oh no, he set me up. See, I thought I was so smart to be set up. I know the game. I played the game. Well, it's always somebody close. It was my dad. He says, I can't control you. He goes, you're dangerous. He goes, I'd rather have you dead than you keep disobeying me. And all I thought about was my kids. I'm trying to get away from him. He's going to kill me, bury me somewhere. So I used trigger words. I was crying, Dad, Daddy, I'm your son. I've been doing everything. I'm trying to hug him and stay close. So it makes it hard and I won't break eye contact with him. And I got out of that garage. And don't ask me how, Tommy, because my dad always says, you pull a gun on somebody, you better use it. It'll come back to haunt you. Well, when we were in his truck driving back, I'm just sitting there tears. I can't believe what just happened. I can't believe I'm out of the garage. I can't wait to get away from him because I want to live. And every once in a while, he backhand me to the face while I'm sitting in the truck. I didn't raise my hands. I just sat there and took it off. I went back and got that gun, and it was a .38 snub nose 5-shot revolver carried in my pocket every day. I said, he ever tries again, I'm going to kill him with the gun. He can kill me. That point, we pretty much did not get around each other anymore. I kept running from him until we got indicted in 95.
So when you go to prison, did you feel like it was better for you to be in prison than on the street with your dad?
I didn't want to be in prison or on the street with my dad. I knew what my dad was capable of, plus I feared him. The thing was, when we got bonded out, I got a lawyer, and I found out I'm looking at 10 to 12 years if I fight it and lose. There's a 97-something% conviction rate. She says, there's one other option. I go, what? She goes, a plea agreement. I go, I'm not cooperating. She goes, no, it's not cooperating. They're offering you 5 years, $125,000 fine. I thought that was great because I'm thinking of my kids. My kids are 4 and 5 years old. I'd rather be home in 3 to 5 years than 10 to 12. So it was a business decision I made. And then I had to tell my father, I'm carrying this gun. I don't trust him. I finally got the courage. We met one day and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said to me, you still owe me some of that money. Why don't you plead guilty for me? Go to jail for me. I'll take care of your wife and kids. We'll call it even. And I won't have to go to jail. And I looked at my dad. I couldn't believe he was saying that. But you know what? I agreed because I said, I don't care. I know I'm going to get 10 years, but my kids and my wife will be taken care of and I'll be away from him. And that was the biggest decision, was I was going to be away from him. The lawyers feared my dad, and they told him, there's no way you can do this. So it was a fluke that we wound up in the same prison. The day I found out, because I wanted to get this drug program for prison. You get 18 months off. 18 months, good time, less than 3 years. That's what I did. Okay. I get this good time, but you got to have something on your record. So I had to say I was doing drugs. But the government wouldn't give it to me because they said I was lying. This Calabrese don't mess with drugs. So I was able to get an MCC, not able, but I violated, and I was going to go. And the list comes up on the wall that I'm going to the same prison as my dad. I got to tell you, I wanted to run, but I was in maximum security doing great time. That was the first day and only day I ever freaked out in prison, when I knew I had to go to the same prison as my dad. But that's, that I wound up in Milan, and I lost the fear of my dad. And before I got there, and while I was in Terre Haute Penitentiary, locked down for 16 days, I dug down deep inside myself. What am I made of? What am I going to do here? I lost the fear of my dad. I made a plan for when I got home, take care of my family, and I'm going to face my dad and give him one more chance to work it out. But this time, my guard's going to be up if he tries to manipulate me. And the promises we made, Tom, before we went to jail, me and my dad, was that I would never do drugs again, and he would never try to bring me back into this life when I got out, that I could be a family man. Because I told him I'd rather work 3 jobs. I don't want to be in this. And that's how we wound up together.
July 27th, 1998, you mail a letter to the FBI. You actually slip gloves over your hands to conceal your fingerprints when you were typing the letter. When you put that letter to be mailed off, what kind of feelings did you have when you actually released that to go to the FBI?
So I was in MCC in Terre Haute for between 5 and 6 months. I was with my dad for 8 months before I sent that letter. Okay. I sent that letter. My dad used to always, a lot of stuff I did was what I learned from my dad. Don't do something when you're mad. I thought this through. What were my options? I tried to work it out with my dad. He's trying to bring me back in. We were having problems in prison. We weren't even talking. People thought we were going to start fist fighting. And he even told me, you don't fear me no more, do you? I says, no, I respect what you're capable of, but I don't fear you. So when I knew that he was manipulating me and what he was doing, that's when I made that decision. So it was all planned out. Before I did the letter, I already knew what I was going to do. And once you do it, you concentrate on what you got to do, not what can happen. I knew it was going to be at least a 10-year thing. I knew it was going to change my life. I knew it was going to affect a lot of people. But I gave my dad every chance to work it out. I didn't do one bad day in prison. Anybody who was in the life, and there were a lot of guys in there, I'll tell you. And my dad actually got jealous that I was doing good time. I worked in the commissary. I was on the warden's board to appropriate funds with 8 other inmates. I was in great shape. That had nothing to do with it. Some people think that I cooperated against my dad because I couldn't do my time and I got time off. That's untrue. That letter that I sent, not only did I wear the gloves, I typed it for no handwriting. I didn't put anything personal in there. Basically, I told the FBI to come out. My lawyer can't know because I'm dead. You can't bring recording devices. I want to help you against my dad. I didn't trust the FBI. I didn't know them. I never dealt with them. They were the enemy. So when they came out, they wanted to know, what do you want? I said, this is what I don't want to be obligated to you. I'll do all my time, pay all my fines, no immunity, but I'm only helping you against my dad. And that's what I did. And they stuck to everything that they said. They wanted to put me in front of a grand jury right away because they thought I was doing bad time. When they got there and seen it, the prosecutor came out there and he said, he's doing great time. I never was in front of a grand jury. They go, this is not something that happened overnight. This is what the prosecutor said. Mitch March, a very smart man. This was 20 years in the making. It wasn't overnight. And it was. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do because I had to go against my own dad. Mm-hmm. And I gave it every chance I could. I even offered to do his time so that we can work on our relationship. Anything.
When did he find out that you had cooperated and wrote the letter?
He didn't. He found out after they were indicted. After they were indicted. He knew there was problems going on, but there was a lot of ruses going on, and he thought there was another guy on our case that was cooperating. And then he gave his blessing because he thought my uncle was going to stand up for them to try to kill my uncle, which they tried and blotched. He told Jimmy Marcello, because Jimmy got transferred to Milan, Michigan, and he told Jimmy that it's my son. It's not my brother. It's my son. My brother's not smart enough to do this. And he says, my brother told my son all this stuff he never should have. It's my brother. It's my brother. It's my brother's. Jimmy believed him. When the tapes came out, he just got done lying to a boss. See, I wasn't going to wear a recording device because it was too dangerous. Plus, my father was too smart. He caught guys twice on the street. But I realized at some point, if I don't get him in his own words, he'll manipulate his way out of this. And the reason he was talking to me was not because he was bragging, because he thought I wanted back in. He wanted me to run the crew with the guy on the street that was running it for him, Ronnie Jarrett. He even told me, and it's on tape, when you get out, you're going to run the crew with Ronnie, but you're going to earn it this time. And he gives you the name of the first guy he wants me to kill, a guy named Ralph Lusso, the curly guy he's talking about in the video earlier. So that's why he's telling me who to respect, who's running things, who to watch out for, okay, and what he wanted me to do. That's what's on the tapes.
I found this kind of interesting. Is it a coincidence that your father always yelled at you for wearing loud clothing, but you chose an attorney in Joseph the Shark Lopez who wore pink socks, shirt, and a tie? Is that kind of coincidence?
You mean he chose Joe?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he only chose Joe for one reason. Okay. My dad was a very smart man. He knew that there'd be a lot of ears listening because he could have got a lot of people in trouble, not knowing he was on tape. But Joe was a direct conduit to Jimmy Marcello, so that Joe Lopez would report to Jimmy and let him know everything that's going on with my dad. That's the only reason he got him. Okay. Joe is very flamboyant. It's funny because my dad made everybody believe he was a poor old man, that I took all his money and didn't have anything. He said I took it twice. So I assisted the FBI in helping in his house in Oak Brook. They found $750,000 in cash, $3 million in diamonds and jewelry, and deeds to over 30 properties in other people's name. All of a sudden, Joe started looking at my dad a little different. Maybe he's all got something here with him.
It was 6 years since you saw your father when you took the stand. He was found guilty of murder and responsible for most of the killings and received multiple life sentences plus 300 months. When you took the stand, did you look at him or did you look away? How difficult was that for you to testify in court against your father?
Well, when I walked in that courtroom, I hadn't seen my dad in 6 years. Like you said, he had aged. I look over there and I was overcome with emotion. That's my dad. I'm going to be locking him up forever. I wanted to run over there at first and hug him and say, come on, Dad, you're going home now. I hope you learned your lesson. Enough of this shit. But as soon as he looked at me with those threats, I knew I was there. Now, he put out a $150,000 hit on mine and my Uncle Nick's head. Okay, that was found out by the FBI, and they had to let us know by law. And after a week of testifying against my dad, sleepless nights, I get off that stand, I go in a room, I start crying. Somebody comes in, and what happened? That's so sad, man. This whole thing is so fucking sad. That's the last time I've ever seen my dad alive, and it was. So it was hard. When I sat in that courtroom, I'm sitting in that courtroom with some very powerful men. It wasn't a joke to me. It wasn't a game to me. I kept my head straight. I concentrated on what I had to do. And my thing was with my dad. Some of the guys, they never even came and questioned me. I don't believe Jimmy Marcello's lawyer did. I know and I know for sure Joey Lombardo's lawyer didn't. And Paulie Charles' lawyer really didn't either. It was my dad and Twan Doyle's lawyer were the ones that were questioning me.
Was it harder to put your father in prison for life or implicate your uncle for murder?
The hardest thing was implicating my uncle with murder because my uncle didn't do nothing to me. Okay. And I tried at first not to, but there was no way I could to show. My uncle had fell out with my dad. My dad was definitely wanted to kill my uncle. And by the time I got to trial, Ronnie Jarrett was dead too. So there were moves, and I felt that everything that was happening in the Calabrese family and the Calabrese crew, that everybody was going to get killed as everybody was getting out, had this case not taken place. So yeah, it's very hard for my uncle, for me to have to implicate my uncle in it. But I do believe I did save his life. He has a second chance. He is with his family. He is leading his life. My uncle was more of a soldier. See, a lot of these guys, when they come be sociopathic killers, it's criminal justification, it's paranoia, and they kill you just because it's their criminal mentality. My uncle had a heart, so most of the killings he did was killings he was ordered. He lived, he was in the Navy. He was military. So he believed when your commander gives you an order, you do it. And he bought into all this. I bought it. I'm not a victim here. There was a point when my dad was grooming me that I bought into this. Mm-hmm. And I was 100% in. But then later on, looking back at it, when you see what is what you hear all the time from people when they get out. It wasn't what my dad was saying it was. And that's why I was trying to get out. Had he let me go and just do my restaurants and do my work and everything like that, me and my brother, we would have been very successful. We wanted my dad out of this. Dad, back up, get out. You can. You're sick. You could step back and retire. No, I got to go down to the neighborhood and I'm going to show everybody and put him in line. He was addicted to this life. It's easy to get addicted to.
Have you ever wished you didn't write the letter?
So there were times I sat down because what some of my family went through and stuff and said, maybe I should have killed him. There was a time when I went to my Uncle Nick and I said, because my brother kept telling me in my ear, you got to kill him, Frankie. You got to kill him, Frankie. That's the only way out. Everything's fine. They're not going to put you in jail, And I heard it's not that easy. I said, first of all, Dad's very street smart. I says, and he didn't kill me. He tried to kill me, but he didn't. And that's what kept sitting in my mind. But there were times that I say, if I did kill him, it would have been much easier for the people around me. The problem is, I don't know if that would have been the right thing to do on my end. So it would have probably bothered me a lot, and I don't know which way it took. So I look at it like this. Me and my dad both had a chance to change our lives. And I'm talking about within our family, not, on the street. We had a chance to work all our stuff out and be a family again. He took advantage of that chance and did all the wrong stuff. And I took advantage of that chance and got a second chance at life. I think about all the time how I would love my father to be sitting in his 80s, sitting next to me, and we could be talking about the legitimate businesses we have and playing with. I'm going to be a grandfather soon, and that he could be with his great grandkids and watching his grandkids grow. The thing that come out of this for me and my uncle and even my brother Kurt was that we broke that cycle. All our kids are either major university educated or successful in life, and not one of them has any of that street that we had in us. So, in war, sometimes you do what you got to do, and you do what you think you've done best. Made a lot of mistakes in life, but I had to do it.
I congratulate you for breaking the cycle and hearing the success of your children and everybody else's. So that's fantastic. And you had talked about, Frank, about this fear from your dad. So I want to ask you a question. What do you say to somebody who may be experiencing a fear of standing up or speaking out against an abusive family member? What advice would you give them?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, it's hard. It's hard because it's a family member. And, depending on what the family member's capable of. I mean, my first thing was to try to run. I wanted to run. That was my way of dealing. But then that's what everybody's way of dealing with. I had to stand up to my dad. And I'm glad I did for the reasons I did. My brother Kurt goes through a lot of stuff because he did everything my dad asked. And he was abused by my dad. And he still can't figure out to this day, why did my dad do what he did to me? I understood what he did to Frankie and why he did, but why did he do it to me? I was the good son. You have to face it for yourself. You have to face it.
I agree. Talk about the tour and what you have going on these days.
Okay, so in 2017, out of fluke, I came back to Chicago and I seen these crime tours going, and I'm like, you know what? I could do that, but I'm going to do it off my book. Now, My book is really a family story, Tommy. You started reading it, even though there's a lot of mob stuff in there. My story is really a family story. The late Nora Ephron, Nick Pileggi's wife, Nikki did a blurb in there, okay? She said, Frankie, this is a true father-son Shakespearean tragedy. She wanted to take it to the screen, and it's close to getting to the screen. I should be announcing soon. But I started these tours. And I take people on these tours, and I take them around Chicago. I tell my story, and I go all the way back from Al Capone all the way to the late 2007, 2012, at the time of my dad's death. And from that, I started doing speaking engagements. I speak often. I do some volunteer work, too, for people that just got out of prison. And then in the last year or so, I've started to move out to Las Vegas and bring them out there too. So there's a lot of history in my story. Another thing I didn't tell you was my Uncle Ed was the international president on the Irish side of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees Union for over 30 years. All the hotels in Vegas, put there by Tony Accardo and Joey Iupa. Okay, so I have a lot of ties, a lot of stories for Las Vegas that involves Chicago. So I'm going to be doing soon on my website, familysecretstours.com, and soon will be frankcalabrese.com also. You can go on there and you can get a little idea what I'm doing and the reviews. And I'm going to be doing walking tours in the Mob Museum. I'm going to be doing driving tours in Las Vegas. I'm going to be doing events, and I'm trying to put a few different little shows together, too, little private group shows that I'm working on with some people. So I got a lot going on, and I have a lot to talk about. That I don't talk about. I mean, this story can go on forever, and that's what I'm going to be doing. Is I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things. Listeners, go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to Family Secret's website and his book. He talked about all the way back to the days of Al Capone. Here's a random fact for you: Al Capone's armored limousine, after it was seized by the feds, was later used to protect Franklin D. Roosevelt after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Just a little tidbit of information from you there. Frank, I definitely want to come on the tour in Vegas here, but if I can get back to Chicago, I'm going to get in touch with you and come on that tour in Chicago. I'd love to see all those sites. I'll be here till early August right now, and hopefully I'll be out in Las Vegas in the fall. So I'm putting everything together, trying to work fast. Right now, this is a full-time thing for me. It's been keeping me busy enough, and I enjoy it. What I do enjoy a lot about it, too, is the family side. Talking to a lot of people, I get a lot of people that ask those same questions. I'm caught up in this. I'm caught up in that. If you can do it, I feel there's a chance I can do it. I get guys telling me my book is like a Bible to them. It gives them a second chance. And that just makes me feel so great. I'm friends with a lot of guys from New York. We have a support group. We talk about stuff because, just because you change doesn't mean when things get hard, you want to do what you know. Right. So I got a lot going on. I'm enjoying it. And, again, I'm not sitting here and bashing the mob. Okay. I mean, a lot of these guys, if they would have did a few things different, I mean, they would have been just as strong as some of these major corporations. There were guys in the life that lived the life that was the way it was supposed to be, and some guys that weren't. Unfortunately, this life changed my dad, and he was one of those guys that didn't live it that way, and it ruined his whole family. So, I'm not going to sit here and just bash everything they did was bad, but you're still dealing with a group of criminals. Frank, thanks for taking some time, coming on my show, talking about your life, your journey, and how you've come through the other side. I appreciate all the honesty and coming forth on the show. Thank you, Tommy. Thanks for having me on. You are more than welcome. Listeners, follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. And if you go to my website, beforethelightspod.com, that's beforethelightspod.com, you can click a button that says buy a glass of vino for Tommy, and feel free to buy me a glass of wine. I'll be more than happy to shout your name out on the show and have a cheers to you. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.